I love this venue because of the amount of opportunities you have to talk shop with people. Last night in the reception area, I got to listen to AT&T, the NBA, GoDaddy, who else was it, Calvin? Genentech, all talking about different issues. And then I was sitting at the table yesterday with GoDaddy, the NBA, again, talking about visitor management. And it was interesting to hear. And you go to a larger conference, I never get to just hear people talk shop like that. So I appreciate that opportunity. There's a lot to share, and we've got a limited amount of time. And I'm glad my time hasn't started yet, the countdown. So I'm going to take advantage of that. Now it's started. That was, I guess, the wrong kind of nudge. The work we're doing, and the key message today, and the reason Calvin has joined us, is that the work and the research we do at MindShift is we gather industry leaders to tackle problems that are just vexing. We're stuck in the mire. It could be engagement. It could be delivering capital projects on time, within budget, and not hating everybody at the end of the project. And so a lot of the work we do is in the research area, and then the next thing I say we do is we provide adult supervision for teams that can't get along. And so those are the two main areas. The reason why GoDaddy is here and Calvin is that part of the research is looking for positive outliers. And William Gibson said the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And more important than just seeing a good case study, when we come in, we like to ask the question, how did you survive this? You know, when did you think it was going to go off the rails? Because positive outliers are doing things, they're breaking the rules but getting better results. I also learned too that Calvin is a millennial and I am a boomer. And that explains a lot now in our relationship together. It's going to get better now that I understand how to relate to Calvin, but he is 38 and I'll be 65, so it's an interesting dynamic. The whole idea of the nudge came out of research, and this is at GoDaddy, so GoDaddy hosted us. And the main message to take away is that the whole area of workplace health and well-being has been under the custodianship of human resources for 50 years, since the 1970s, actually. And we assumed, launching this research, that what we would do is share how we could augment what they're already doing. 6 months into the research, I had to go back to our team and say, look, we've got a problem, and I'll get into that problem. But I said, we need a completely different focus. And the whole mantle of workplace health and well-being, whether you like it or not, is going to fall at your doors at corporate real estate and facilities. Human resources is not capable of handling the size and scope of the problem, and I'll walk through that. And that was a real shock that we did not expect to find. And I do believe there has to be a great collaboration, but what we found is companies are divided into 3 levels of managing health and well-being. The first level, and the lowest rung, where about 80 to 85% of companies fall, is handling it as a cost and risk mitigation effort. And if that's your primary effort and focus, you're going to lose this war once I tell you what the war is. Then there's a second category that uses it as a primary means of attracting and retaining employees. And that's where the amenity wars we talked about, that's that world. But then there's another level where they do it because it's part of our DNA as a company. We just value humans. And we looked at 2 distinctions. You can have human resources spelled with a small h and a big R. That's most companies. Or you can have human resources with a big H and a small r. Humans first, and treating humans as humans. So at GoDaddy, we had what we call our book barn raising summit. And this is where we compiled all the 2 years of our research together. We actually created 4 versions of the book before I went off and wrote it. And GoDaddy was a great place for us to go. The hero of our story is Richard Thaler. So one of the innovations we brought in, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how this works, is this whole idea of nudge. It comes from a discipline called behavioral economics, which is the way people actually make decisions. And what we learned is that wellness programs is built on something called traditional economics. In other words, they assume that you're a rational human being. Now, most of us, how many would assume that most of us are rational on a good day? Okay. How many of you have kids? Okay. How many of you have given them some good advice with good incentives and then had to switch to different kinds of incentives? All right. And then you ended up bribing them. So what behavioral economics shows, and I wish I could go into the research, but the way our brains are designed is that we have limited amount of calories to spend, and most of the day we're in default mode. In fact, you know some people who spend the whole day in default mode, where they're not thinking anything. And because of that, that provides an opportunity for us to influence behavior. And we'll talk about what Richard Thaler did with that. Now, interesting, Rachel shared with us where the IWBI is going, and it's amazing to think that it was in 2013 that we had our first well-certified corporate space, and it's the CBRE headquarters project. I shared about this story in the book Change Your Space, Change Your Culture, but I dealt with it as a prototype for good change leadership. Stakeholder engaged change leadership. I missed the whole part about the healthy workplace side. I have a small paragraph in the story about Delos, but it was at the end of my book deadline. They're the first. I had no clue what it really meant until the book got published, and this office started ordering caseloads of books. They became my best customer for books, and I finally called, that's Lou Horn. I said, Lou, thank you very much. My kids thank you. They'll have shoes this Christmas. I appreciate that. But what's going on? And he said, well, the little section that you shared with us, we're giving this out to clients, and we've had 15,000 visitors in the last 18 months. How many have been to a really cool workplace? How many have had 15,000 visitors come to that workplace in 18 months? Now, you know they weren't coming just to see a cool workplace. They wanted to know the story. How did this environment, how did what you do so transform your employees and your business model? That's what they wanted to hear. And so I think we have an opportunity here, a tremendous opportunity. In 2015, I compiled a group of leaders to come because I came back from seeing it myself and hearing the story and going, oh my gosh. And of course, my business, I sniff stories out. Is this a new story? Is this something we should cover? And we brought a group of leaders to CBRE in 2015 to ask those questions. Is this kind of a one-off example? Is this ground zero? What does it mean? What does it mean with our industry in this whole conversation of wellness? And at the time, in 2015, if you went to an industry trade, you would get a wellness presentation, but it would usually be somebody in activewear who was happy and preppy and telling you about meditation or yoga. And I call that all the wellness tips and tricks. But we really didn't fundamentally understand the problem we were trying to solve. And that's where we picked up. We said, for us to be credible in this conversation, we've got to go back to the beginning and figure out what is the problem. You know, it's the Billy Beane Moneyball situation. What's the problem? And so that's what we did. The first step was to go to probably the best source who's been the lead spokesperson about the threat of chronic disease in America, and that's Dr. Roizen with the Cleveland Clinic. How many know who Dr. Roizen is? He's an incredible individual, 18 best-selling books, Oprah 28 times. His colleague, you may know him better with his colleague, is Dr. Oz Mehmet. And so when I met with him, I was stunned, absolutely stunned. Of course, I'm totally a novice at this, and I'm soaking it up. He was gracious enough to spend 2 full days with me, just going through data and research and all the medical records. And the problem began in 1984. And in 1984, the US population began to consume approximately 400 more calories per day per person. So what does that mean? That means about 1.5 pounds a year the US population is gaining. In my 30s, I was that person. I was around 190 pounds. I had a medical issue that I didn't realize was related to how my body was not coping with this change. And it changed my life. And now today, I'm probably younger today in terms of my biology than I was back in my 30s. Where we've gotten to is that 70% of our population is overweight or obese. It's a norm. Okay? Get your minds around that. That's a norm. We build furniture for it. 50% of the US population has some form of chronic disease. Chronic disease eats up 80% of our health costs. So if you look at our $3.4 trillion we spend on health costs, 80% of that is because of chronic disease. That's lifestyle diseases. Now, here's the thing that put me over the top. It's growing at a 7% compounded rate, and it has been for the last 40 years, 7 to 10%. So any math majors out there, where does that leave us in the next 10 years? There's no slowdown in sight. So this is the problem wellness programs were designed to solve. Now, it's a little hard to see the lines, I'll interpret it. The blue line is all non-healthcare federal spending, which is at about 15% of GDP. Currently today, health costs are 18% of GDP. What you see with that yellow line is somewhere between 2025 and 2030, it's going to top 30% of GDP. Dr. Roizen says that at some point around 25%, it's game over for our economy. And I asked him, why isn't this the #1 topic in every C-suite in the country every Monday? That's the problem. And part of the problem is it's a line item that's only growing at a small rate, but we don't realize that in business world, if you have a cost that's growing and compounding faster than your profits, then you've got a major problem. So we have an asteroid coming to the planet. So that was when I stopped and said, okay, we've got a bigger problem than I thought. It's not about yoga rooms and gyms and breathing. It's a structural problem that we have that wellness programs are not designed to solve. Then I went to the #1 advocate and expert on wellness programs, Dr. Ron Getzel at Johns Hopkins, and I read most of their research. And he's got a great paper, we reference it in the book, on the 10 key things you must have to have an effective wellness program. And one of them is committed, consistent, persistent, visible leadership. And I said, well, we can take 80% of companies off the list because of that. But when you go down all of the areas, robust communication, good robust health data on your work population, environment, all the things that you need to have, I asked him, so how many companies are doing this? And his exact answer to me, and I have it recorded, is very, 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 that's 4, few companies are capable. And I paused and I said, could you just hazard an estimate? Give me an estimate. How many are capable? And he said, less than 5% of companies are capable of having an effective wellness program. And that's when I went back to our group and said, we got a bigger problem here. It's not that we're going to make wellness programs better. We've got to rethink, how do we help shift work populations? How do we create healthier environments? And the story gets even better than that. These are the major lifestyle, these are the behaviors that lead to chronic disease. This is what every wellness program is designed to try to get you to do. How many people know smoking is not good for you or didn't know that? Okay, well, wellness programs will educate you as to why, and then give you some kind of incentive to not do it. And then abuse of alcohol or drugs is another one of the key lifestyle behaviors. Sedentary lifestyle and eating too much of the wrong kinds of food. We call it comfort food. That's what leads to chronic disease, and that's what wellness programs have been ineffective in trying to shift. Then we go to the RAND report. This is Soren Mattke, Dr. Soren Mattke from Munich. The government asked the RAND report, the RAND institution, to do a 10-year study. And I asked him, I said, so do wellness programs work? And in his German accent, he said, well, it depends on what you mean by works. He said, if you mean, do they reduce cost and improve health outcomes? They don't work. That's the result of a 10-year story. And we've got other research that we've cited in the book. They fundamentally don't work, and we can tell you why. And the major reason why is Dr. Ahmed Sood. We had a summit at the Mayo Clinic. Dr. Ahmed Sood's specialty is around happiness. It's a tremendous life story how he got there, and the research is incredible. But he basically said we have the cart before the horse. We should be talking about happiness and well-being before we talk about health. And it comes in the form of the stress conversation. So stress is the killer. Stress is the killer in the workplace. It impedes your sleep. When you look at what stress does, how many wake up or have ever gotten up in the morning and read that one email and then all the way into work? Okay? You were in that fight or flight mode, and that fight or flight mode was only made for you to run away from the lion or the saber-toothed tiger and to burn off all that cortisol in the run and to live another day. You were either designed to run like hell or fight like hell. That was it. And it was episodic. It wasn't meant to be chronic all the time. And so when it is chronic all the time, that's when it begins to change your hormones, changes your epigenetics. So you're passing this sensitivity to stress on to your kids. This chronic stress is the thing killing us. And the workplace, according to Harvard, is the #1 source of either high or very high stress. There you go. That's the villain. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we have to realize, what does stress cause you to want to do? Those bad behaviors. So that's where we said, unless we're dealing with root cause and human nature. So root cause is stress causes these coping behaviors, these unhealthy kinds of coping behaviors. And now we need to get into human nature. So this is what we can do. We can shift behavior through environmental nudges. We can create healthy environments, and Rachel went into a lot of that today, so I won't repeat that part of it. And we can reduce stress, and that's part of the GoDaddy story. So let's talk briefly about nudges. So over the holidays, you may eat a little more, drink a little more than you intend, and then what do you typically say in January? What are you going to do? Yeah, I'm going to be good. But your best friend Sally invites you to dinner. You didn't get to see Sally over the holidays. It's mid-January, and you say, okay, I'm going to go out, but I'm going to be good. I'm going to order a Caesar salad, no croutons, light protein, light dressing. I'll have 1 glass of white wine, Pinot Grigio, and then you get involved in the fellowship of it all. And you don't realize that you've been drinking wine, but the glass is still the same level. You've got a very good waiter. And at the end of the meal, the waiter comes up and asks, what would you like? Would you like dessert? And Sally says, oh, you've got to try the molten chocolate cake. It's to die for. And to spread the guilt, you get 3 or 4 spoons, and you've just been nudged. Well, what we've discovered is that we can use that in the environment. And this is a Google kitchen. So Josh, Google has been one of the leading appliers of behavioral economics, and how do you make the food you want people to eat desirable, and you can see that refrigerator, the glass on the top is the clear glass. So when I go to Google and I get a chance to go to a micro kitchen, I always want to go to the top because there's something new there that I've never tried, and I call those the California drinks, the kombucha, the Fiji water, the coconut water. But down below you can see the frosted glass, and there's lots of research on just how much that influences people's choice. The suggestion I like the best is place a full-length mirror next to the vending machine. So there's all kinds of different kinds of nudges. We don't want to be nasty with that. And then we spend over 90% of our time indoors, which we heard from Rachel. So these lights are going to affect how I digest lunch. They're going to affect how the temperature is going to affect my energy level. If my body has to work harder to keep warm, then that's going to take calories from my brain, so I'm not going to be as effective. And remember, it was only 2013 where building science and medical science came together to give us a framework to ask the question and to work with how do we want to live and work healthier together. It's a very new phenomenon. And then, we were asked by one of our clients, are we pinching pennies and the design and the environment side and losing dollars of engagement? So we all know this curve in terms of where value comes from and how to leverage that. The final part too, and then I'm going to bring Calvin up because we want to get into a conversation of where this is all going and their journey in this, is design can reduce stress. It can reduce stress by giving people choice and giving them some control of their environment, but also through legible design that's intuitive. I go to some places that like to trot out and show me their common area, and nobody's using it. How many have ever gone to a place where you see this common area and the reason no one's using it is there's only one. It's not common. So I go to the University of Pennsylvania, and in their stairwell, in every landing area, they have a little round table with some chairs around it, and there's 8 of them, and they're all being used. Why? Because it says this is for everybody. So the space you have has a voice, and it tells you what we do here, why we do it, if it's done well, what's permitted and who's important, and we have to take that into consideration, and we have to design our areas, and if the space fits what we're doing, if the story of the space fits what we're doing and communicates what you can do easily and intuitively so you don't have to feel like, like going to a hospital, where am I here? I just want to see my sick relative. That's stress inducing, and stress is cumulative over the day. So we can do that with design. I'm going to ask Calvin to come up. We're going to talk a little bit and shift into more of a conversation about their journey in this because they are a positive outlier. And we're going to move these up and we're going to shift so we can have a good conversation. And I don't even know how I ran across you guys or how we got. That was a great story. So I remember my first time meeting with Rex. I was attending a conference that you were at with Smith Group, one of the design firms that we had worked at. And I remember I'd completed the Core Clarity. The Strength Finder Core Clarity.
Yeah, the Strength Finder Core Clarity assessment. And I had this badge around my neck, and it listed out, I think, 4 or 5 of my top strengths. I remember I walked in and I had my boss at the time, our chief people officer, with me, and you looked right at my badge and just gave me a 2-minute narrative that described who I was, how I worked, and how I went about achieving outcomes, and we just thought that was magic.
Sometimes it looks like that. Yeah. So when I came to GoDaddy, though, I had a completely different impression of what your company was about and what it was like, mainly because of the Super Bowl ads and things like that. And you were there during the Bob Parsons days. So what was that like, and what spurred the change? Because it's a completely different company.
Yeah, the GoDaddy story is a great narrative in cultural transformation, radical cultural transformation, design transformation within our workplaces, and then within our service lines down to the facilities level. So I really can't talk about GoDaddy without giving credit to the founder, Bob Parsons. If those of you who are not familiar with the story, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Bob came back from Vietnam and pursued his accounting degree. While he was doing that, he was writing code in his basement at the time. He eventually hit a gold mine when he sold that accounting software to a major software company. He then took the proceeds of from the sale and eventually started GoDaddy. Now I get the question a lot: why GoDaddy? Why is the company called GoDaddy? Quite frankly, it was because BigDaddy.com wasn't available, or else I'd be sitting here today representing Big Daddy, which is a little weird. So from there. Bob at that time had, he'd been doing a lot of really great things with the company. He was, the culture at the company was a little odd. I remember my first day walking in 2007, and I was greeted by this big burly security guard in black fatigues and combat boots. And so I'd entered into the lobby, and I think his demeanor was more accusatory than welcoming, asking what I was doing there for a job interview. And so, and that's how the company was run. It was really sort of this paramilitary-esque type of...
Very Spartan, too.
Yeah, type of corporation. The highest paid person in the room was making all the decisions, and it was very command chain driven. But Bob did a lot of great things at the company. He really paid close attention to the folks who were serving our customers. And so he went over the top with extravagant parties, and he really invested back into the people. I remember attending my first holiday party at Chase Field in downtown Phoenix. Multi-million-dollar extravaganza. Bob was handing out cars and mortgages paid for a year, and thousands of dollars in cash and prizes, all taxes paid by the company. And so I think in that way, Bob gained a fierce loyalty and following from his people. But at the same time, Bob didn't invest in the workplace, the physical workplace itself. I remember showing up my first day at our Scottsdale headquarters and thinking, this is a $500 million, back then we were doing about $500 million in annual revenue, but this is a $500 million a year company. It was a very institutional, multi-tenant facility. It looked like an old Men's Warehouse. So sort of the traditional ACT tiles throughout. Bob also didn't believe in purchasing new furniture. So all of the furniture and chairs, that was all reclaimed. And so we fast forward now to 2011, where private equity steps in, and they purchase a major stake in the company for $2.25 billion. And so very smart play by KKR and Silver Lake to come in at that time. And as you can imagine, what that meant was a regime change at the top. So in 2013, Blake Irving was recruited to be the CEO of the company, and Blake introduced some radical change in the mission, the vision, the culture, and the values within GoDaddy.
So, with Blake coming in, what were his values, priorities? What was the shift going on? Because that was, there was a lot to overcome or change coming in after Bob Parsons.
Yeah, that's right. I mentioned this sort of fierce loyalty and following to Bob. So Blake had his work cut out for him. He came in after being a leader of product and engineering at Microsoft and Yahoo, but he did come in with a vision. Blake was very customer focused and wanted to make sure that we as a company, as a culture, were really focused on our customers. And so Blake and the C-suite team, they came up with this vision that meant we would radically shift the global economy towards small business. And that seemed to resonate with every employee in the company. And so we were kind of drinking the Kool-Aid and buying into this thing. But it wasn't just lip service from Blake. I've spent a lot of time with Blake in meetings. I've spent a lot of time with Blake personally. And the thing that he was probably most, or is still most passionate about, is is gender equality in tech. And so I remember that first year, Blake went out to Grace Hopper, and if the folks in the room don't know what Grace Hopper is, it's this incredible industry event that's put on by the Anita Borg Institute, all around STEM and women in tech. And so Blake goes on to stage, and in the background is this GoDaddy ad from one of our Super Bowls. And so he walks onto stage to a room full of thousands of people booing at him. He proceeds to tell his story, and it's a very personal story to him. His late sister was a professor at the University of Washington, and she was also a leading expert on women, self-esteem issues for women. And so she had passed away, and he took that charge, that mantle up, to progress that story. And so here Blake is at the Grace Hopper conference, telling his story, explaining why he's so passionate about this cause, and talking about what GoDaddy was going to do to lead this change. That was an incredibly powerful moment. Wow. And so this was the change, and we saw it. This was a visible shift in the culture of the company. That's right.
Then there was a building.
Then there was a building.
Yeah.
That's right.
So this building was it's your global tech center, but it was originally going to be a completely different kind of building. Yeah. So what happened in that story?
Yeah, so I think when Blake came in, he saw the same thing that I saw when I came in 5 years earlier, that our facilities, our workplaces were kind of a dump. And we needed to change that. So at that time in my career, I was actually working on the IT side of the organization. So I came to GoDaddy as a network engineer. I managed data centers for a few years. And then I started running our global network operations center. And so for those of you that don't know what a NOC is, this is the group that's responsible for managing the health of the infrastructure across the business. So when really bad things happen, all these outages and denial of service events and issues, this is the team that steps up to solve all those problems. So I'd been in that role at the time, and working under the CIO. One of the first things that Blake did, he restacked the C-suite leadership deck. And so my boss at the time, August Goldman, very charismatic, one of the most personable, caring mentors and leaders that I've ever had. And so he was perfect for the chief people officer position. So August gets pulled over, and shortly thereafter, he pulls me in and asked me to run TI projects. And at first, when he asked me to do this, I thought he misspoke, like transposed TI and IT. So I had no idea what the acronym even stood for, I think, for the first 3 or 4 months of the job.
And so now you're getting ready, and I think I'm off. That's Blake, by the way, and that's the conference. So I'm off the slide deck here. Let's see. There's the annual. Did we do that too?
Yeah. Maybe just to take a step back and,
yep.
and talk about the story. So I stepped into this role, and I was charged with leading the build out of a few of our facilities. We were an Arizona-based company at the time, so we had 400,000 or 500,000 square feet of real estate. All of a sudden, we were engaged in M&A activity. We had just acquired this company out of Silicon Valley, and so I was charged with building out our Silicon Valley office. Shortly thereafter, we started our presence in Kirkland, Washington, and then we were looking at doing something very special in our own backyard in Tempe, Arizona. But that's the real story that we really talk about in this in this narrative. I hadn't been working on the Tempe project at the time, but Blake had called me up and asked me to bring the floor plans into his office to review.
And this was more of an old style GoDaddy.
That's right. We had a real estate director at the time who had really held this close to the chest, and didn't really want anybody else to be involved in the planning of this project. And so I showed up in Blake's office one day with August Goldman, our Chief People Officer, and we started having this discussion, around the plans. And Blake, I remember, vividly, it was the most uncomfortable meeting I've ever had in my entire life. But he looks over the plans, proceeds to crumple them into a ball, and throws them into the trash. And now there was a conversation there. It's not appropriate for this audience or any other, quite frankly. But he looks at me, and then fortunately August interjected and said, "Look, Galvin hasn't had his hand in this thing yet." But he gave me 2 weeks to come back with a radical new design. Right. And so that's what we did. I partnered with my friends over at Smith Group, JJR in Phoenix, and we spent the next 2 weeks running through the programming, running through the design, and yeah.
And it turned out to be an incredible facility. So now, after the building is built, you also begin to transform the experience, the employee experience.
Yeah, so some of the outcomes were actually pretty amazing. We were creating these physical workspaces that really resonated with our people. But I know what many people in this room know, or hospitality and hotel general managers know, is that if you also don't have this great service model on your facilities program, you're not scoring any points. As I think about the great experiences that I've had in hospitality and the terrible experiences that I've had in hospitality, the one thing that makes the difference is typically the people. And so we started down a road to tackle that. Now, at the time, just before stepping into the role, our procurement team had been working through this enormous RFP process to select the right provider for our facility services. And so they selected ISS Facilities North America. If you're not familiar with ISS, they're a global company of about 500,000 employees. They don't have a big presence here in North America, but they have a pretty significant presence throughout the rest of the world. So I inherited this contracted service provider, and just had to take it and make it into something special.
But they came in with kind of the traditional, low cost. How are we going to, make sure the trash cans are clean? And you had a different kind of meeting with the head of the account.
Yeah, so I remember the first day meeting with the key account manager who was assigned to GoDaddy, and we had these conversations about up-leveling the experience, tearing down the silos between these service lines to produce uncommonly good outcomes for our employees. And so we worked at it for a few months, and he just couldn't seem to get it. And so I asked that he be removed to the account, and then cue my now good friend, Wade Lewis. So I remember when Wade, he came in on the first day, similar background, similar qualifications in the facilities world, and he came to me and he started talking about cleaning, brushes, and who the hell knows. But I just stopped him and I said, "Look, Wade, tell me magical fairies come out at night and clean the floors in the building. I just expect the blocking and tackling to happen. We need to have a conversation about the experience." And so we started off at the site level, at the facilities management level. And what we found, the folks that we had in those positions, they had really strong skill sets in HVAC or mechanical, electrical, but where they lacked a little bit of skills were around empathy and really coming to understand the customer or the employee. So they were trying to solve the problem before the employee could really relate the entire scope of the challenge that they were facing. And so we took our hard services people and we moved them to the back of the house to solve and troubleshoot those challenges. And we went out and we found folks that were skilled in the hospitality services, and brought them in to become our site managers. So we called the program experience managers, or the XM model.
Right. And what's the metaphor you use? The love boat? Is that?
Yeah. So the thinking was we were really working to sort of create that sense of community that we had built. Maintaining that with a contracted workforce. So we look towards cruise directors who do a really great job of this. If you've ever been on a cruise, at least a good cruise, the cruise director is typically the person that brings everybody together and ensures that the guests are having a great time.
So there was one story. Now, the people that are there, and I experienced, I can't remember her name, Carrie or?
Yeah, and Tim,
Carly?
Amanda, Carly.
Yeah,
right.
so Carly saw that I was kind of looking for something. She came right up to me and said, look, you stay in the room, do what you need to do. You just tell me what I need to do to make your time here effective. And then at the end of the event, she came up and said, is there anything we can package for you and ship? I've never had a client where they actually came up and did that. What is it about the training and what kind of latitude do they have to just do things on behalf of employees?
Yeah, that's right, Rex. And we try to institute and instill the same values that we have as GoDaddy as a company within the contracted facilities workforce. And so our experience managers, they develop relationships with the employees, and they're encouraged to do so. They're encouraged to look for things that are a little bit out of the normal. Just one story to share. I remember a time where we had an employee who had just lost a family member. And when she returned from bereavement, there were flowers and balloons waiting for her. And that's something that the experience manager just noticed and saw. And so, and similar to your story, your narrative, our XMs are always looking for those opportunities to step in and to really make a positive change in the life of an employee.
Yeah. I was really impressed by the training. They're trained that at 10 feet they give eye recognition, at 5 feet they give a greeting to the employee, but they're also trained to read the employees are they frustrated or whatever, so they know to anticipate and to step in. That was really impressive to see that. So for the program, it was a prototype. It's being adopted by some other companies because it has been successful, but when did you know you had gotten over the prototype phase and this was something that was sustainable and you could embed into the culture?
Yeah, so all of this change was happening so fast within the organization. We had, we had new leadership that had come in. We've got these new workplace environments. GoDaddy, we're 20 years old, and within 5 years, like we were radically changing everything, about the company. And so all of a sudden, I started receiving emails from people, some people that I knew, some people that I didn't know. Telling me about their experience, whether it was their experience in the workplace or their experience with a particular member of the facilities staff, and so that was something that I'd never seen before. In fact, I remember just before moving into the position, I had a former senior facilities leader, that had told me that facilities will always be a thankless job, and nothing could be further from the truth. We've experienced the goodness time and time again from the impact that that these folks have on the workplace, on our employees.
Yeah, thanks. So when we were doing the research, the things that we saw that you can do, you can shift behavior through design change architecture nudges. You can create a healthy environment that's a well framework. You can reduce stress by through legible design, and then you can reduce stress through this experience manager. So those are 4 areas that we found were not high cost to do, but had a huge impact. And before we leave today, what we'd like to do is certify you as nudgeologists. On your tables, you have a worksheet. And this was something we came up with going into the GoDaddy facility, and what we decided to do is, so nudges were big on our minds, and we just thought we'd break people into teams, let them wander through GoDaddy, and create a list of physical positive nudges. So on one side you see the apple. An apple is greater than a donut. And then the other side, we were looking at the stressors and the de-stressors, the happiness versus stress. So what I'd like you to do at your table is take a minute or two to think of your workplace, and think of, just on the donut and the apple side, some positive and negative nudges. And then I'm going to ask your table to share amongst yourselves and pick one that you think is the most interesting nudge, either positive or negative, you can come up with. And once we go through that, we can then certify you as nudgeologists. So start with a little bit of just think time, write a few down, and then I'm going to have your tables share. Okay, now share at your table a couple of the ones you came up with, and then pick something that really is an interesting one that we might call on a few to share. Okay, so who's got an interesting nudge they want to share from their table? We'll take 2 or 3. So collaboration space would be a positive nudge, encouraging people to get together. What about another nudge, positive or negative? Go ahead, Angela.
We've got thousands at IWBI, but one of my favorites is the appropriately portioned plates and bowls and glasses.
Okay,
so that
great.
we know that we're eating the right amount.
Yeah, so going from 12-inch plates to 9-inch plates, yeah, there's about a 40% more volume that you unintentionally, your default mode puts on those 12-inch plates. Narrow glasses that are still 8 ounce, they look bigger. That's a good one. So this is just to give you a sample, and we encourage you to go back and do a nudge audit and make it fun. It's a lot of fun to do. Come back. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit you can come away with, but it gets the conversation started about how can we be more intentional in our workplaces and realize what things kind of induce positive behaviors or negative behaviors. For example, if you've got news feed all the time on your monitors, that's stress-inducing. There's some really good videos of nature. The hotel at the IFMA conference, the check-in session was out of order, and so they made this makeshift one, but the videos were all of fish and coral areas, and it was just very pleasant. So we want to think more intentionally about how we're inducing behaviors, and so nudges are one way that you can do that. If you have any questions at all or would like a copy, just reach me at LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm easy. Hold on. I got the thing here to give you both Calvin and Minds. So reach in LinkedIn. I've also got some copies of the book that I'm happy to give out and sign if you're interested. If you don't get a copy and you want one, just send me a note on LinkedIn and we'll mail a signed copy to you. This is just an overview. I consider this kind of like you've bought your gym membership and this was the orientation on the equipment, but you did not get a workout. I think our definition of wellness should be, when we go home, how do we let people bring their whole selves to the workplace, do their best work, and at the end of the day, leave happier and healthier. So I appreciate your time here. Thank you.